Erica, I really like your story on how you came into this authentically. And I want to talk about that. But even in looking at our communication skills overall and nonverbal, where you started. So I just got back from a run, as I do almost every day, a run or a ride. And I'm out there on the sidewalk or on the trail, and you pass people and you're within, feet of them. And I'm just so, gosh, I don't want to be negative, but it just feels so heartbreaking that people don't even smile. I feel like here, point number one, if you want some value here, is that it feels like this whole aspect of communication, whether it's verbal, nonverbal, digital, is somewhat of a lost art, and which is why you're on the show, bringing our attention back to. What I want people to hear is what they're missing, which I feel like is what you outline in your book so well.
Absolutely. Kevin, I grew up as a shy and introverted girl. My parents were Indian immigrants. So at home, we spoke Hindi and Punjabi. And at school, that meant I had accented English. And I remember being a kid, I didn't know Hindi that well either. I would watch Bollywood movies at home. And I didn't know exactly what the actors and actresses were saying in Hindi, but I could study their body language to know exactly what they meant. I knew what furrowed brows meant. I knew what that direct eye contact, I knew what a smile, what a handshake meant. And these symbols were really allowed all of us to understand it's not just what people say, it's how they say it. I remember being, at school growing up in, a neighborhood outside of Pittsburgh. And because I was so shy, I would often observe others' body language to understand the norms around me. I would study how the popular girls had their heads high, their shoulders back. The cool kids were slouching during school assemblies.
Right, of course.
And it really allowed me to understand how much body language shapes how we sense make others and how we engage. That caused me to become passionate about this skill and become an expert in nonverbal body language. But about, I would say 5 years ago, Kevin, I started to see what you're talking about. I would see the constant looking down at our phones in business meetings and how that was actually interrupting creative flow. I saw more of the lack of direct eye contact or individuals even missing the lean in a sales conversation. And what we all knew of as traditional body language, which is so critical, was actually being affected by our digital world. That's what really led me to start to study the importance of digital body language. And I think the lost art of communicating is understanding that body language hasn't just disappeared in a digital world. It is transformed. We have to learn how to bring it back in a changed world.
That's it, the lost art. I mean, we hear so often the soft skills that corporations are saying, we don't see those in this younger generation, especially, though I appreciate people talking more and more about those aren't soft skills. Those are necessary skills. And I think I saw you write something to that effect as well. And this one with how we communicate, and whether it's face to face like you and I are, that's why I do Zoom, so I can see the verbal cues and see you and make that connection. But even if we're on the phone and you can at least hear the tone, and the attitude. And now how does that translate into digital? Because as important as this is, and your initial preoccupation with body language, I mean, so this is the Ziglar show. This is, sales is number one. That was Zig Ziglar was, the king of sales. And we learned that how to do proper body language to connect with people, to get their trust, to have that bond. And hopefully people know that. I mean, we're not going to go through all that. Would be a show just in and of itself. So you became a pro in that, which I love. You became that because of the natural aspect of how your childhood developed and where you came from, your parents and whatnot. But now I think you cited in the book that 70% of our communication is digital. And yet whoever took a class, I mean, it's really, again, that's why you're on the show, digital body language. Where does that taught? Nowhere. We have well, now we do. Thank you. But it's tremendous. And I don't think we grasp the enormity of how much of our communication has gone over here, and we have no training.
Just like I was an immigrant to learning traditional body language as a kid, today we are all immigrants to the world of digital body language. This is like learning a new language when we go to a foreign country, but it is not a foreign country. It is our world here to stay. And in many ways, sales has always been about having gregarious, strong, assertive, confident traditional body language. But now we have to master being able to show that virtual executive presence, being able to connect in a world where we have no perfect direct eye contact. I may be looking into the camera as I'm talking to you, Kevin. You may be looking at me. I can't read all of your cues. In the world of screen freezes and echo delays,
Yeah.
we can miss engagement signals in conversations. We can even struggle with reading the lean in a conversation. And these were cues that were critical to sales knowledge in the last 30 years. But now we have to upgrade them for a different context altogether.
Well, and it again got me thinking. We had these when it's verbal, when it's face to face, or even Zoom. And we get the benefit of that. It's not quite the same, but we get the benefit of that. So if we are trying to connect with somebody, whether it's your spouse or your kid or an employer or a customer, okay, we got that. And then we moved so much of it to phone, and which I don't like. I have a hard time with audio processing in general, but at least you get the person's tone and attitude and laughter, or downtrodden voice or whatnot. And now over here, yeah, you talking about it is a different language. And in going through your book and your studies, that reality that how do you lose emotion? And with that, it's just, well, you lose everything. It's so difficult. And that's what drew me in and going, okay, so because I don't think I'm doing it well either. How do I convey emotion well? Just go there, because there's so many different veins of that, but just there, is that what you see? Is that the primary thing we're missing then, is the emotion?
I think that technology does create masks, and
Yeah.
we can be more tone deaf instead of tone deft, and we have to bring that level of nuance, tone, and emotion back. And there are principles around how to do it that I think are important. First of all, I think we have to be conscious to never confuse a brief message with a clear message. I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. One of my clients sent a no subject calendar invite to one of her team members for a quick meeting on a Friday morning at 8 a.m. He thought he was about to get fired. There had been budget cuts that week, and it can be easy with the lack of context to assume the worst.
Yeah.
The second thing we have to do is understand people can't read our mind, even with punctuation and symbols. For some, an okay in all caps with exclamation points feels like shouting. For others, it feels like excitement. And for others, it feels like urgency. And so
Yeah.
understanding these cues are important. Another one is we have to hold our horses, understand that less haste equals more speed. It can be easy to reward the fastest person who jumps into an email or the quickest person to share on a video call. And that often causes us to prioritize speed over thoughtfulness. So taking that extra moment to truly slow down, to create a space for everyone to speak up, will actually ensure that we're using digital body language thoughtfully versus in a hasty way.
Well, that word thoughtfully, I mean, if we're saying, because overall you're saying, look, communication is paramount. It's, kind of back to it's not what you know, it's who you know. I feel like even more than that, it's not even more than that is how you communicate. And you're saying, okay, first off, we've got to bring the gravity back to how much our communication matters for our overall success, because it's easy for me to ask, basic questions, black and white pillar questions like, okay, so, text, emails I don't want to be too curt if I'm trying to be brief, but if I'm too long, what should I do? And I would assume you're saying, well, it depends. You've got to feel out the person. And we're back to the individualized communication, understanding that person and really checking in, which again, over here in the digital world, I've never really heard anyone speak to until you, but it brings us back just to we did a show recently on sales, and there's a quote that Zig Ziglar says, if you have a product or service that you feel can benefit somebody, it is your moral obligation to sell it. Well, Tom Ziglar, Zig's son, said, well, then by proxy, it's your moral obligation then to become proficient at sales so you can. And here saying, if we're going to be communicating with people, I hear you saying it is our moral obligation. That's a big, word, but if you want to be successful and do it well, you have to become a great communicator, no matter what it is, but especially over here, if 70% of our content communication is digital and we don't have any teaching on that.
That's right. So let me give you some examples of how
Please.
this applies to the modern day salesperson. If you want to get ahead, if you want to stand out in sales and marketing. So number one, let's talk about the different channels. Email.
Yeah.
I recommend, and in my new book, I talk about this. emails are visual. People read them like websites up and down. For example, did you have a clear subject line?
Yeah.
That really makes or breaks whether people even open your email today. Did you have a response time in there if you needed something back quickly? In your body of your email, did you get to the point quickly? Whether it's bold, underline, headings, understand that people read like a website in the body of emails. And that can even make or break whether you get that first meeting or whether you don't. And whereas before we may have relied on our traditional body language, on calling people instantly, we are upgrading. Whereas email now and video calls are actually more common than face-to-face meetings and phone calls. I'll say phone calls are very common, and I'm a big fan. I like to say picking up the phone is worth 1,000 emails. But at the end of the day, we have to understand how critical our written communication is. Now, when we go to video calls, one thing that many sales teams I've been working with have been doing is when they're doing a prospect meeting with someone new, they will zoom in an existing client to talk for 5 minutes to the prospect about how much they love their product or service. And then they zoom out. They're in for 5 minutes of the pitch meeting. This would have never happened in a traditional coffee sales meeting. Physically, it just wouldn't happen. But today we can actually leverage the fact that we're not as geographically biased and bring anyone into the room to actually deepen trust. So my recommendation is to think about digital body language creatively. How can you engage more quickly? At the same time, there are also some basic rules, such as what's your first video first impression? Even before that, your meeting calendar invite, clear, concise, to the point, actually showcases that first impression that we make within the first 7 milliseconds of meeting someone face to face. And then at the end of the meeting, sending that quick email recap within 30 minutes of the meeting, I like to say, is a new virtual handshake. If you send it even 2 days later, it doesn't feel like a handshake. It feels like a long gone discussion. So simple awareness that there are new cues and signals, and how we use them will make or break engagement in the changed world we're living in.
I mean, is it fair to, well, or so somebody's hearing this and they're saying, because I looked at, in reading through your book, I almost felt like to some extent you could take your message or your advocacy of this and say, okay, so if I'm going to do well in this digital communication world, I have to become a great writer. Is that going too far, or is that valid?
I would argue that we have to become proficient or fluent in digital body language. Now,
Okay.
being a great writer in the past or being a professional writer is actually a bit different. Great writers have perfect grammar, punctuation, have fluid storytelling. That isn't exactly what we need in the world of email and the world of video calls. I actually talk about, how there's 4 key principles, or I call them 4 laws of digital body language, that are much more what I call being a great communicator in today's age. Writing is an essential skill, but in many ways, writing clearly and writing concisely is the new empathy. So knowing how to do both at the same time is the critical skill to be able to get ahead and get heard.
What about mirroring in that aspect? Because, that was a sales 101 I got way back in probably some Dale Carnegie course. If you're sitting across the table and somebody leans in, you lean in. If they sit back, cross their legs, do that, and how people like that. I mean, you could take that here, yet if I've got somebody who's one of those text or email and they're very, I'm going to use the word curt, they're very concise, but they're just blunt. And that can come across wrong, as you talk about in the book. I could take that and go, okay, so I'm just going to mirror and do the same thing back. But my fear is that you're still going to have the problems that are inherent when you do that and don't follow some of your, primary points of communication. So is that relevant, that it's not always, don't always just mirror? There are still some tenets that if you want to do it well, you should still follow anyways.
That's right. Mirroring was a very common lesson for all of us, learning traditional body language signals for much of our lives. If we apply it in the digital world, I would argue that, in many ways, we are always answering 2 questions that should shape whether we should mirror back in digital body language or we shouldn't. The first question is, who has more or less power? If you're the individual that has higher power and maybe you're trying to build more connection, social connection with a younger teammate or someone you've met for the first time, it might actually be good to mirror them to build that connection. If you have
Right.
less power, you may want to err on the side of formality at the beginning before you deepen your relationship. The second question that guides whether to mirror or not is, how much do we trust each other? Are we longtime colleagues, or is this a client or customer I've worked with for years, or is this an initial sales meeting? And again, I think both of those cause us to understand when to mirror and when not to. And again, the other thing that's important is, I talk about how there are different individuals with different digital body language styles, almost like Myers-Briggs, but for a
Yeah.
digital world. So on one end, we have what I call digital natives. These are those that are texting, IMing, quick, to the point. They'll probably never listen to a voicemail, but they may send a voice note. On the other end, Kevin, are digital adapters. These are the
Yeah.
individuals that still feel like immigrants to our new country of remote work. They really only just want to get on the phone or meet in person. They have more reluctance with new technology. To give you an example, my father is a digital adapter. When he sends me a text, it starts with "Dear Erica" and ends with "Love, Dad," and I have to scroll through it because it's as long as a letter. He's 75 years old and he doesn't quite know that a text is not the same as a handwritten note, but it's just an example how we're different. And so, the general rule is, if you're trying to build connection and you know that that potential prospect is not good at responding to email, but will respond to your text, know when to connect in a way that best resonates with them. That's using good digital body language. At the same time, if they're using multiple symbols and emojis or are the reverse, know when to be yourself too. I think this is, we shouldn't have to lose our authentic style. At the same time, being conscious of when to err on the side of formality is important.
Yeah. It's almost a question in that in regards to like emojis. You talk about that in there. I have never used an emoji in my entire life because when it initially came out, it felt like, oh, that's something that a teenager or a little kid would do. And yet now I realize that so many of the texts and emails I get professionally have emojis. And I got to admit, it's still not I haven't added that to my language, but you cite those. I don't know if you're advocating for an emoji, but you are saying, look, we're trying to find ways to express emotion. That is one way. Is that fair to say?
That's right, Kevin. So similar to the way words like super and my bad and awesome were not just colloquial words that we used with our friends. They started to be used in the workplace. We've
Yeah.
kind of upgraded to that, where the emoji has become not only something that teenagers in Japan use, they pervade corporate America. And they're used by CEOs and new employees and mid-level managers to infuse nuance or tone. And I
Mm.
generally like to describe emojis as the new facial expressions, because you can be happy, you can be sad, you can be grateful, you can be angry through the power of your facial expressions. Even just by the power of your mouths, we can signal these things in a face-to-face traditional body language world. And so my general rule of thumb when it comes to emojis is think before you emoji. So if there's a high power and trust gap, maybe know when not to, but when to use them to showcase who you are, create that sense of engagement. I'll never forget one leader who said, I'll never forget the moment with my team that I switched from the exclamation point to the emoji. And it felt like a
Mm.
new level of connection with them. And they were more younger team members. But I think that, again, my encouragement would be dare to use an emoji, Kevin, try it out, but also be authentic to yourself. And again, on the other side, make sure that you're not reading into someone else's messages. If they're using these symbols and you're not used to them or you're not using them as much. In fact, there are some gender dynamics at play. One study showed that a younger woman in the workplace that used multiple emojis in an email compared to a man at any rank level in that company, the younger woman would be seen as incompetent. The man at any level would be seen more as casual or friendly.
Right.
And so I'm a big fan of breaking those biases. So, women don't need to feel pressure to use a lot of that language if they don't want to, and men can dare to use them and try. And so I think what's critical is for us to be aware that these signals exist, that we subconsciously make impressions of others, and to check our bias and assume good intent.
Well, and yeah, as I think about that, as with people that do, even my family, I've got, family text groups and older and younger amongst that. And it was sarcasm, especially if somebody types back, that's great. We can take that either way. So now I'm getting used to seeing that's great. And it has a, emoji that's actually a smile, or one that's literally a frown, or one that's kind of the straight mouth across that. And you get the context, or you get the tone, I
Yes.
guess. And
Similar to our voice intonation. If I
yes,
say that's great, like when I'm really, it sounds passive aggressive versus that's great, where
right.
I'm genuine and excited. And I think what's interesting, you're talking about texting, Kevin. In many ways, the emoji has replaced the fact that a period at the end of a text for some people can feel a bit off-putting because it's meant to be a casual channel. And one study that showed that a period at the end of a text for certain Americans will feel like you're angry or mad, for others will feel like it's just good punctuation. And the fact that the
Huh.
rules have changed. And that is another reason why emojis are so common in text messages or chat and IMing tools.
That's so funny. I'm looking back at a text with you, and I actually did put a period. I put a period on on
You
the end of one,
did, you did.
and on
And
another,
I assumed good intent.
I have no idea why I did that. Now, exclamation points. Yeah, I think I do that plenty. I'm the king of the dot, dot, dot. And I never thought about it. I just am. And somebody called me out. They said, yeah, your first book, Kevin, should just be dot, 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 because you do that at the end of most every sentence. I don't know why. I tend to write conversationally. I don't know what that says. Maybe you can tell me what that says about
Yeah,
you, but
I can tell you exactly. I have a breakdown in my book around what does the ellipses mean, the dot, dot, dot. And what I think is important for all of us to know is that older people use them differently than younger people.
okay.
And that's what the research shows. So for, those that are older professionals that have grown up in the world of professional writing and traditional body language, dot, dot, dot can be casual, maybe an omission of information, continuing a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in the world, especially for digital natives who grew up in the world of AOL Instant Messenger and BRB, dot, dot, dot actually signals passive aggressiveness or someone being upset or alert. And I have a story in the book about an older leader who on a Friday sent a response about a deliverable to his younger teammate saying, let's discuss dot, dot, dot. And that younger teammate was anxious all weekend before Monday because he thought he did something wrong. In fact, that leader was just trying to be casual and grateful.
I will clarify a lot of times if I feel that, like, I mean, I do not know. And I am one of those kind of on the people pleasing side. I don't like conflict or something. So if I feel that, I'll try to clarify. But you mentioned casual multiple times. And one thing that I have become aware of, really in helping other people who really were worried about a communication. And I said, it seems like, not seems like, it is. People treat this digital communication similar to being in a car, and you will often act towards somebody in an aggressive way or whatever, in a way that you would never do face to face. And we know that with social media, people are free to, spout whatever. They'd be so much more tactful face to face. So it feels like in that sense, and you speak to this, that I mean, there's a lot of, in this digital aspect specifically, even more grace is needed than normal communication. Yes.
I think that we have to show radical recognition in a way because what was implicit in traditional body language has to be explicit in our digital body language. And it very much shows up. There is a study called the online disinhibition effect that shows that when we are communicating behind a screen versus in person, we're much less likely on the recipient side to feel empathy from that person, even with the same body language signals, on video versus in a room. And we are more likely to forego formalities, to either mask what we think or send more passive aggressive messages. We don't know if someone on the other side, especially on a phone call or in an email, if they're on the verge of tears or they're extremely excited. And obviously, if we were face to face, we would adjust our cues based on that. And I think that is a big challenge. So as part of that, we have to take extra steps, whether that's, as a leader, taking that extra step to give credits where it's due, radically recognize others at the beginning of meetings, share who did a great job. Don't just write the THX period email. That's like an acknowledgement of an email. It's not a thank you anymore. We've also upgraded from that. So taking those extra steps to be explicit in your gratitude and your acknowledgement and how you're feeling. And if you're upset, knowing how to share that in a way that's not a passive aggressive vague email where people aren't on the same page, picking up the phone, having those candid dialogues is incredibly important.
You use that word explicit. Would you advocate saying this is a place with this digital communication? it is a place to, would you want to give permission or even advocate people to further clarify? Like, don't be afraid to clarify. If you're left with that text or that email and you're not sure of the emotion, or you are projecting an emotion and, feeling, especially a negative feeling, to be more apt to clarify and not be afraid of doing so.
One of my clients sent a text message to his boss that said, "Do you want to speak Wednesday or Thursday?" And his boss's response was, "Yes."
Yes.
Now, what do
Yes,
you do
of
in
course.
that situation?
Right,
The
right.
high stakes meeting, you're rushed. You know your boss is about to go into a big meeting, and you're not going to get an answer for another hour. This is an example of the daily challenges we feel because we are living in a culture where often we're not taking that extra step to be clear instead of just brief. And it's natural. The reality is we have to take that extra second to think before we type. But if for that individual that was on the receiving end of the yes, my recommendation is, if there is high trust, ask for clarity immediately. Don't waste time, just get to the point. If there is low trust, maybe know which channel to use. If this is someone you've never met before, instead of sending that another email, maybe knowing to have that quick candid conversation or clarification on the video call or on the phone call that's coming next. Again, power dynamics. Is this someone where you have to schedule a call with their assistant to get on their calendar, or is this someone
Yeah.
you can just text to get quick clarification? And again, knowing those power and trust dynamics will help you know which digital signals to use.
Well, so on that, you mentioned earlier, you said something about the phone, the phone is worth 1,000
Emails.
emails. There you go.
It's
I mean,
also
that,
worth 1,000 texts.
okay. Well, so on that though, cause I could hear people getting this message and saying, well, yeah, let's just try to minimize the digital body language and do more phone, do more Zoom, which I get, but I to some extent, well, like here, so on shows like this, where I'm doing it with somebody, this is recorded, we're doing this to produce a great show. I want to see you. I won't do it otherwise. If somebody says, no, it's going to be a phone only, we're not going to do it. Do another show, just because I can't get as much value out of that. But when you get to texts and phones, you actually talk about it in the book about somebody who's kind of a phonophobe. I really am. If unless it's an emergency, I would just rather not. And I'm doing it selfishly for my own time, period. And so if somebody's saying, gosh, can we cut that out? There's going to be a lot of people who just know that they're not going to. It's going to happen digitally. You just got to deal with that. Thus the reason you've got the book on how to, I mean, yeah, if you can minimize it, great. But for the most part, we just all need to learn this language.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'll share the story about a friend of mine, Alyssa, and what she deems as her phone phobia, and
Yeah.
talk about how we all navigate this. So Alyssa is in her 40s. She is a CEO coach, and we were starting to get to know each other. We became friends, and we were scheduling a dinner. And this was our first meeting where we were going to meet in person together, just the two of us. And, we scheduled a time, and then I had to cancel. I had to reschedule. So I sent her an email and we rescheduled. And then, maybe a week later, I realized something else popped up. This is the world of busy travel a few years ago. And then I had to reschedule again. And then finally, something else popped up. And I said, I cannot send her a third email. We don't have high trust yet. Let me give her a quick phone call.
Right.
And just say, I'm so sorry. Can you do this other time? Because I don't want to be that obnoxious person rescheduling the third time. And so I give her a call out of the blue. She doesn't answer. And, I leave a message because I'm old school at heart in some ways. And I get this text back a few hours later saying, did something happen, with multiple question marks?
Yeah.
And she finally admitted to me when we had dinner that when she gets phone calls out of the blue, it must be an emergency. It must be alarming. And for me, especially because I think I grew up in a very pick up the phone culture, and a lot of my clients pick up the phone, it was something that I was doing out of a sense of sensitivity to our relationship.
Right.
So at the end of the day, I'm a big fan that there is a lost art to the phone conversation, and it can be incredibly beneficial. But understand, as I said earlier, there are digital natives to digital adapters. Digital natives don't want phone calls out of the blue. They grew up in a culture where you schedule it on their calendar, whereas digital adapters, they are ones saying, why are my natives not picking up the phone? Like, why are they sending one more email? So take that extra second to acknowledge that there are different styles. And if you're in sales, know how to connect with those that are different from you. If you're not going to get a response, if they really want to do phone call, know how to adjust to their style, and also know when not to, because of the nature of the complexity of the conversation. And my general rule is, if it's high complex, knowing when to get on a phone or video call is important. If it's low complex, if it's a yes or no answer or a quick decision, do not schedule a phone call. Do not have a video call. I think that's a big reason why we have so much Zoom fatigue right now, is because we're trying to force a lot of meetings. Some of them could be emails. Some of them could be thoughtful messages. And we're diverting that everything has to be a 30-minute meeting. And I also fight that. Do not have 30 or 60-minute meetings when it could be 10-minute meetings. I've had 3 10-minute meetings in a 30-minute increment. So use your creativity here to flex your muscles. And again, it's not about just all moving to phone and video is better, because that's not the answer. We're all fatigued from that. It's actually knowing when to use each channel and when to change the channel.
I mean, as we talk about this, Erica, I mean, it feels, so I guess I'm 50. I'm not a digital native. I have adapted, to this, and coming from, especially with the, just sales and communication overall, the value of that, it feels like you're drawing people, or one of the rally cries here that I get from the book and talking to you is, if I look at, I was going to pick up my phone. I don't have it here, but if I pick up, look at text, look at email, that we think of those. If you ask somebody, what are those things? They would say, those are communication tools. They're methods of communication. And you're saying those are relationship tools. And that's what we're missing. Is that, can I put that as a banner over?
Nailed it. Okay. You nailed it. These are relationship tools. These are not digital platforms. I even hate the word tools. These are relationship makers or breakers.
Okay.
And it is our responsibility, if we want to lead, if we want to sell and market in today's age, to know how to use them and how to use them effectively.
It's almost like the digital stage. So if we have somebody who does, whether you're in sales or not, I mean, we're all, as everybody who listens to the show knows, Zig, says we're all in sales because we all want to influence other people. So if we want to do that, and we're going to do that face to face, we know, hopefully somebody's been privy to that there are, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, there are the nonverbal cues and talking to somebody face to face. Then I remember way back in the day, phone etiquette type things that happened. And now we have, and then let's go to the stage, because a lot of people in this audience have heard, I've had people on the show like Pete Vargas, who talks about, hey, here is how to command a stage. Here is the methodology to be successful on a stage in front of people, whether that's in front of a TED Talk, audience, virtual or not. And now you're showcasing, this is a digital stage if you want to succeed here. I literally just never thought about that. I mean, again, I was enamored with the books. I thought, I've seen the negative side really of how the digital communication can hurt us because it's missing so much, but have never seen much gravity given to, this is a stage. I kind of like that. This is a stage, a digital stage that you're going to make or break relationships on, and you can't get away from it. So you're saying, one, we need to be a student of this stage. And then, of course, to the person, to cater to them. And you talked about that. And I like you talking about the power dynamics and whatnot, but that we need to be who doesn't at this point then? I mean, you should be in schools and in the business world as well.
I'll never forget, Kevin, pre-pandemic, I was on a conference call. 3 of us were remote and 3 people were in the office. It wasn't until the 26th minute of a 30-minute meeting that someone in the office said, does anyone on the phone have something to share? We had been excluded the entire time.
Oh, right.
Because with visual biases and geographic bias, we tend to listen more carefully to who's in front of us, who we can see. This was a challenge well before the pandemic. Now in our new hybrid world, these are skills that are not only going to be critical when we're commanding the stage in the room with others, but as we have individuals coming in on video screens, listening in on phone, live streaming in, we were actually not as inclusive as we thought we were then, when they would just have to listen and not really get to engage. And so Again, I think these skills are critical, whether we're working remotely, whether we are, we had that first face-to-face meeting and we're continuing our relationship digitally, whether we are managing hybrid meetings in our new normal. And the more that we can understand how to flex these muscles, how to adapt, and how to think almost like TV show hosts that are used to bringing in individuals from a screen into for different segments and create that level of engagement. Again, that can feel heavy, but I like to say, whereas commanding a stage face to face was a lot about performance and like theater. Commanding the digital stage is almost more like being a TV show host.
Huh. Well, yeah, you talk. So again, taking this, what it's bringing to me and why we're doing it, because what it's bringing to me is I keep using that word, the gravity that I've got to take, Kevin, have to take the digital communication just as seriously as face-to-face. And in that sense, have more affirmative action because it is different. You use the words, I think it was even in the intro or right at the beginning of one of the chapters or whatever and I just wrote down, how do I convey ... How do I convey? So if I'm sending this, if it's just, we can meet at 5 o'clock at the restaurant, whatever, that's pretty basic, not much to convey. But other than that, if there is a feeling, back to the emotion that I'm trying to convey, how do I do that? Which you actually go through some examples. I don't know if it's exhaustive in the book, but I pulled it out of one of the chapters, some examples of how do I say, well, like you said, how do I say I agree? If it was body language, did I have that one right? If it's body language, or no, you talked about like if I'm stroking my chin, if you see me, we're looking face to face. Well, what does that mean? Or how do I convey that feeling digitally?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when we're stroking our chin, we may be showing active listening, that we're thinking about what someone said. And we're often, when we stroke our chin, we tend to lean in to the conversation too.
Yeah.
So what does that look like in a digital setting?
Yeah.
In a text message, it could be immediately liking the text very quickly, showing our engagement. In a video call, it could be writing in the chat something substantive about what someone just shared, instead of just saying, I agree, or just nodding your head, but actively engaging. It could be,
Right.
in an email, quickly responding in a way that is thoughtful to what was just shared and following up with some follow-up ideas. And again, these signals look different, but they show up in different cues in different channels as well.
I'm looking at the stuff because I pulled it out of the book. If we want to give that, I'm thoughtful about it, taking a few minutes to respond to the text. And it made me think I've literally, I can think of one, I can't think of the exact one, but in the past few days where I literally texted back. I think I put, let me think a second. Because I didn't want them to think that I had gone away necessarily.
You had ghosted them. You were thinking.
Yeah, I wanted them to stay engaged. Don't go away. So it's probably my wife, because she's tend to text something, and then if you don't text right back, she's off to something else, and you're going to hear about her from hours later. And I want her to keep her engaged because I want to finish the conversation or whatnot to send back. Yeah, just literally that. Hey, I'm thinking. I think I've done that with emails. I'm like, man, give me 30 minutes and just some of that proactive communication, realizing the person doesn't, you can't do that. I can't scratch my chin. I can't look thoughtfully over there. All the things that I do so naturally was taught to and learned to from, like we can do right now, look at each other, at least on Zoom, but you give us the ways to do that. And again, I feel back to, we all have the moral obligation to figure out how to be successful on this digital stage. What you said it was not, you didn't like not relational tools. What'd you say? Relational platform?
Relational relationship makers or breakers.
Makers or breakers. That's so I kind of wanted to hit where are some of the biggest downfalls? And I guess you could say overall, I mean, we could cash it just in business, but is it, well, I don't know if it's any different. You can tell me if it's any different than what we do in our personal lives as well. But what are some of if we take, specifically text and email, and if you want to separate those out, what are some of the biggest mistakes we make? Just some of the biggest, most detrimental, common mistakes that you see, that you as the expert here are getting all your texts and emails every day. This is your area of expertise. You're going, yeah, they did that. They did that. They don't know.
Let me give you 3 of the most common ones.
Please.
The first is being in a rush all the time. being busy doesn't always mean that you're being thoughtful. Taking that extra second, research shows that we're more likely to reward the fastest person to respond back to us in an email, or the quickest person to jump in on a video call. And we may not be taking that time to understand, maybe our introverts need more time to process ideas. Maybe we should have sent an agenda in advance, 48 hours before. They had time to think about it. And then on the
Right.
call on everyone, or say, I'd love to do it, hear from everyone in this order, or in a video call using the chat tool to say, could everyone share their thoughts in the chat first? And then I'm going to call
Right.
on a few folks that have different perspectives. Simple things like this, again, go a long way. Again, more in that TV show host mindset around truly creating cultures where we feel respected, where we feel heard, and where we feel included. And if you're a salesperson that is a natural extrovert and you're selling to an introvert, knowing how important it is to use digital body language carefully will make or break that sale, especially in
Right.
a virtual setting. A second one is forgetting to show gratitude, forgetting to show that you actually care. And I'll give you an example, that I shared in the book. Ethan, who is an employee at a company, has a very demanding job. There's a lot of situations where he'd have to stay up late at night to finish a deliverable. And he told me he remembers being in the office, staying up all night, finishing the deliverable, coming back to the office at 7:40 a.m., delivering that deliverable to his boss. He could see the relief in his boss's face, the smile, the gratitude, the thank you that his boss said, as his boss gave it to the senior boss. And everyone knew that Ethan had done that hard work. And there was a shared appreciation. Now, in a virtual setting, Ethan stays up all night. He sends the message.
Right.
He may not get even an email back from his boss. He might get an email with a K period or a THX period and not
Right.
feel appreciated, respected, or valued. So take that extra step to be explicit. Even just the power of the handwritten note is important. But I even recommend the quick note. And if you're someone who can't thoughtfully get back to someone in a deeper way immediately, even just writing, as you said, Kevin, got it, we'll be back to you tomorrow. That is also respect, especially if people
Right.
are working very quickly for you. And then one of the most common, the final third, pet peeve or big risk is multitasking. And I think that in today's world, there's high levels of multitasking. It's easier to do, let's be honest, on video calls and on phone calls. We're constantly in front of our screens. And I actually think that having a year of constant multitasking is really going to affect all of us as we go back to traditional face-to-face body language. One of my hypotheses that I don't have data on yet is that we're going to look at each other in the eyes less because we spent a year looking at screens. We're going to
Wow.
look down more at our screens and our phones, especially in hybrid meetings. We will want people to speak in bullet points because we've been reading emails and bullet points. And this can have major risks. It can cause us to miss lean-ins in conversations. It can cause us to, assume that someone is disinterested because they're so distracted by the amount of technologies that we've had around us. So I would argue that digital body language is going to reshape our traditional body language, and we have to be thoughtful of that as well.
It's so interesting you say that because, back to where I started off with, and I feel like it's increased this propensity for me to be going along the sidewalk or the trail, which I'm doing every day. And people don't, well, most of the time they won't make eye contact, period. And again, the pandemic, I'm sure, has made, sometimes they actually, separate, like move over, but they don't make eye contact. But then when they do, it's in my, I was drilled into this, you smile. If you're looking at another person, you smile. And I do that, and how seldom they do. And I'll get frustrated and want to stop and go, I'm a human. I just smiled at you. Seriously? You're just going to give me a straight face? And I haven't thought about it in those regards. So this could be somebody who spends the majority, if not all of their time, alone, not face to face, or just with somebody that they're used to seeing. And that's, they don't have to really, I don't want to say perform, but even emote for.
Yeah.
And they're out of the habit. And again, yeah, especially maybe during this pandemic, and they're not really, it's like a wake up. I literally want to have like a sign, like smile, because I feel hurt, I think. And yeah.
One of my clients was talking about, her high school daughter who was in the car with her. She was driving, and her daughter and her friend were in the back seat. and they weren't talking at all. And it was like a
Yeah.
30-minute ride. And afterwards, she told her daughter, she said, "Why weren't you talking to your friend?" And she said, "Mom, we were talking. We were texting the entire time," because for her generation, talking is texting. And so I think that in a similar way that, you and I, Kevin, have probably learned traditional body language in a very different way. And, I may be a bit younger than you, but I also grew up in a world of landlines and how to take a message on a landline and
Yeah.
punch cards and making collect calls. There's a whole generation, and they're already 10 years into the workforce, that grew up in cell phones and AOL Instant Messenger, and there are different cues and signals. So I think this is a moment for a lot of cross-generational learning, where a lot of adapters can teach digital natives how to use traditional body language well, and natives can teach adapters some of the new cues and signals of digital body language.
Well, you talked about, so number three, multitasking. That one is, I would say it's another pet peeve of mine, and it's also difficult. So you and I are here on Zoom, and I'm aware that my camera, if I'm going to look you in the eye, I'm looking at my camera and I'm not even looking at you. So I'm looking up here. Now I've got you real close, so hopefully it's not too much of a
Hey, you're
difference.
pretty good. It's almost not noticeable. Mine
Well,
is actually a little off.
I can tell. And of course I know you're aware, but on the multitasking. So if we go to, obviously, the hardest one for me is being with somebody face to face, whether you're at lunch or talking to them, and the propensity to look down at their phone. And I feel completely disrespected. And I've had it done by, like you talked about the power issue, I've had it done by somebody who may be in more power, and probably just as much or more by people who are not. Like they're there, they kind of want my attention and my business, and they're responding to their phone. Like, are you kidding me? But they just don't know. And then even take it here, like to a Zoom. I kind of want to speak to that. I do spend a lot of time doing these meetings on Zoom, and I'm really aware. And I think people don't think about it. And I feel guilty sometimes of, if I'm not looking at you, because I'm looking over here. So
Right.
as you and I are talking, I'm trying to do a great show here and to listen to you,
Yeah.
and I'm taking notes. So you say something and I'm over here, but I'm thinking, you have no idea if I'm doing that or if I'm texting my wife about what we're going to have for dinner tonight. And I found myself sometimes even saying that, "Hey, just so you know, well, I'm telling you right now, I'm over here texting the brilliant things that you're saying so I can comment more on them, not talking to my wife or somebody else over here, but you don't know," I guess is the point.
Right.
And it leaves it up. If I don't talk about it, it leaves that up for misinterpretation. And that happens so much. I see that on Zoom calls again, where I don't know, are they looking at a different screen? Are they waving to their dog? Are they listening at all? And I don't know.
That's exactly right, Kevin. This is much harder in a virtual setting because we can leave things up to our own interpretation
Yeah.
when we're connecting with others. You and I may be speaking, and I may be taking copious notes on what you just shared, but you may think that I'm responding to an email, or if I am looking up multiple times, I may be thinking, and that might also create a level of disengagement with you on a video screen.
I do that, Eric. If I'm being interviewed, like if you're sitting here asking me questions, I got to think about it. I'm looking out the window. It's just my habit.
Right.
And you don't know,
Right.
did I lose him? Yeah.
And don't worry, I knew that, and I assumed that because of how engaged we are in a back and forth, but
Right.
especially on that call of 16 people, it can be a lot harder. Even one study showed that even a slight screen freeze delay, can cause others to feel like that the person on the other side is not as engaged, and signal that neurologically in our brain. We're used to the fast-paced fluidity and creative flow in a face-to-face meeting. So this is a big adjustment for us when it comes to how we perceive others, and also brain science. And it goes back to, you said earlier, it's about, how we say it. And I go back to the Maya Angelou quote. It's not even just about how we say it, because she said, it's not about what you said, what you did, it's about how you made others feel. And I think the reality is digital body language is how we make others feel now.
Well, in that, I'm just sitting here, right? And it feels like an opportunity cost. It's, or it's an opportunity investment. So I can do that. So I can do this thing with you. Let's say if we're doing just a business call, and I am focused on the deal, or, the topic, the whatever, the meeting, whatever, and that's it. I'm not thinking about you. I don't think that I need to think about you, because this is just Zoom. We're here to communicate and, connect A to B for this business thing whatsoever. And I can just do that. And you're going to go away and you could possibly feel nothing. It's just neutral. You get that. I get that. We were just sharing that, nothing. Or I can make a misstep and cause you to feel worse,
Yeah.
or I can take what you're showcasing here, take the opportunity and increase and grow a relationship, increase trust between us that will lead to my own benefit, aside from, to being the right thing to make you feel nice as a human being. That's the right thing. But we
Right.
also know reciprocity. I'm going to benefit from that. So there, you're kind of, I feel like I'm going to showcase this book and say, guys, you don't have to, but you're going to miss an opportunity cost. And it's huge. It's
Yeah.
gigantic. Just like what you said with Maya Angelou.
Yeah, it's not just about productivity. It is about lost profits. Now that's the opportunity cost. I ran a study that showed that the average office worker is wasting 4 hours per week on poor, unclear, and confusing digital communication. This is a study I ran with a research company called Quester, and it was just in the last few months. So if you don't think that this matters, think about whether prospects, customers, and clients are going to respond to you if you don't use digital body language carefully.
Well, I'm thinking back to what you said, relationship maker, that all this stuff, it's not a communication tool. It's a relationship maker, or it can't maker or breaker, I think is what you said. That it can be a relationship depleter or a grower. But to some extent, maybe, are you saying is it seldom neutral? Because that's what would rock most people's world. This is not a neutral platform. We think it is. And you're saying, no, it's going to go one way or the other.
That's right. It is. There's a spectrum.
Okay.
And
Okay.
there may be certain situations that are neutral, in a corporate culture where everyone's speaking the same language and everyone uses formality, but that's not the norm anymore. And it is different. And just like we have different regional dialects and different cultural accents that shape different parts of the world and how we engage with individuals, there are digital body language accents and dialects. And the more that we can be fluent in the ones that matter as we sell, lead, and market today, the better.
Well, that's why you're on the show. I love the topic. You've opened it up. You've really opened up to me. And I would like to think that I have been doing well. I'm somewhat aware, but
You're a
not to,
master at this, Kevin.
well, you're sweet, but not to this degree. And I'm thinking about some things.
Except the period you put at the end of the text to me.
I'm looking at it. It's right here. It's so funny. And I do tend to, most of my text, the reality is I'm not a big phone user. I have an iPhone, so I have iMessage on my computer. So if I'm working, which I often am, and got a computer, I got a screen, I can type away, man. So I'm doing nuts. And so sometimes I probably lose the nuances of texting because I'm treating it like an email or a document or something like that. And I have been called out for, like your dad, to do these. Dad, this is text, man. This is like 3 pages. I've even done them sometimes where I'll bring it, I'll try to do it, and it'll go, it'll reject it, say it's too long.
Right. I can't wait to see what my 3-year-old daughter tells me in a few years about what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for bringing this to the show. I'm eager to give this to everybody because I feel like it's an opportunity, possibility, but even more so the reality that we're probably, so many of us are hurting our communications. We're hurting trust. We're hurting relationships, and we don't realize it because we look at it as a communication tool, not a relationship maker. So I love it. It's brilliant. Thank you for bringing it to us. Thanks for giving us your time. I'm the first beneficiary from the Ziglar Show. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. It's great to be on the show, and I hope everyone will check out Digital Body Language, available everywhere.
Absolutely.